Welcome to Let Me Know How It Is, a podcast about all things geek. For this episode, we look at serialized and episodic storytelling. What are the benefits and drawbacks to both? Thanks for joining us, and as always, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. So this is a topic I've been wanting to talk about with you guys for a long time. I'm really curious to see where this conversation can lead. We're talking the benefits and drawbacks of serialized storytelling versus episodic. I'm Zach Slater.
I'm Frank Melman.
I'm Tommy Smithereens.
I'm Clifton.
So, in case you don't know what we mean, think of serialized storytelling as you would a full season of TV. Each of the episodes is used to tell a much bigger story across the whole season, and as such, the whole series. Daytime soaps are a really great example of this. Episodic is when each of the episodes tell their own story and there isn't any carryover to the next episode that follows it. So think sitcoms for that. I hope that makes sense. So let's start with the benefits of episodic.
I love episodic. I mean, to me, episodic can be done in which you watch a show and not have any understanding of what happened before. It just works on the imagination of the show itself for that episode. I think it gives certain people time to shine. I like watching it because it's usually lighthearted. You know, the episode's not as in depth as you would think in most cases. But I'm
really surprised that you said that you loved episodic, and I'm really happy you did because I thought I was going to be alone on it.
No, I like episodic. It doesn't make you think as much or overanalyze the situation like serialized does. It's like you're happy in the moment. Or if you can watch an episodic episode, it's just like it's like going to watch a play. Like you don't have to worry about what you saw before. It'll just tell its story right then and there, and work off the characters or how they act, and just leave it at that.
Yeah, I think there's a beauty to the craft of doing a story for like beginning, middle, and end, and we wrap everything up in 22 minutes.
Yeah, or I'll even say, or even an hour long one as opposed to a 30-minute one. You know,
yeah.
I just like because you can drop in and out of it and not care, you know, or leave you hanging for another week like back in the days in which it tied together with a larger story or something. Yeah, episodic. In fact, a lot of the older TV, like the great older TV shows, just you can watch it for what it was. Andy Griffith. I like Make Room for Daddy.
Yeah.
Dick Van Dyke Show. I mean, yeah, they're always
going way back.
Yeah,
oh yeah.
But we watched in syndication. We're not that old.
No, but but I just like how they stood alone. It worked off the imagination of the creator of the characters for each episode. You know.
Yeah.
Well, I think it get back to what Zach was saying about there was a certain craft of you had depending on when you're making your show, you had 22 minutes or 27 minutes or whatever before commercials became dominant of a way to sell the show. I agree with you that I've advocated I'd watch a 24-hour a day Andy Griffith channel if it was on. I would definitely check in and out to see what episode was playing because some of those 22-minute episodes they're genius. They're amazingly crafted television or amazingly crafted stories that are just those that chunk. And you can drop in and you can have a cursory knowledge of, it's one of the things where the shorthand of those characters is so great that you don't really need more than a scene to like, oh, well, this is what this character is.
Yeah.
And I think
exactly.
And I think I think a lot of times you don't, I don't think a lot of times it does, a lot. Again, I think I think the word craft that you use is really important because I do think that, those older shows like Dick Van Dyke's another example, great example of a show that knew its characters, knew what his characters' beats were, and you could have seen, as many times as you watch that episode, what Rob and Laura are going to do, what Mel Cooley or what's Maury Amsterdam's character. Help me out here, somebody.
Oh God, yeah, no. I caught it, whatever it was. I'm blanking on it too.
Buddy Sorrell. Buddy Sorrell is the character. Buddy. You knew right away what, if you watch one episode, pretty much there wasn't a lot of evolution of character, but those characters worked in their element so well and were so well defined that there wasn't there was the illusion of change, but really you knew full well the next week that somebody was going to be in a similar situation and it was going to be funny, and the characters were going to hit those moments because that's what the characters did.
Yeah. There's an elegance to episodic, I think, in that, like you said it perfect, Frank. Like it's those characters are kind of frozen in a single moment, right? Like Bart Simpson is who he is, right?
Yeah.
And will always be that. And no matter what he learns in that episode, he's still going to be Bart Simpson in the next one. And there's a beauty to that, I think. I really think that there is. And on top of the fact that it's kind of, do you remember what it was like when you could miss an episode and not freak out?
To me, that's what I feel like with Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Simpsons was a good one too that didn't occur to me until I just said it. Like, it's not in my notes or anything like that. And yeah. And there is a really great shorthand of like, you can't really waste a lot of time. Like, the characters got to be who they're going to be, and it's got to be quick, right? Because you're not planting seeds for something later.
No.
It's got to pay off right there.
It's that moment, like you said, it's frozen time, or that moment in Amber where they're basically, like another one that I know that I watch. I don't watch. It's not conscious watching, but I do enjoy the show a whole lot. But I didn't watch it when it was actually on. That is now that it's just wrapped up. Was Modern Family? I think Modern Family does a really good job of. We set up our premise in the beginning. All these characters, weave in and out of the scenes, and then everyone's who they're supposed to be, and then it wraps up at the end.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that one's a really good. You can watch an episode from episode, and you know that Cameron's going to freak out. You know that Phil Dunphy's going to be big-hearted but goofy. All those characters are going to do exactly what they're supposed to do from episode to episode, no matter what the premise of the episode is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the ones that I think recently does it really, really well. I remember at one point, Zach, you and I were talking about there was an ability. It was either a contest or it was an essay thing where you could basically do a spec script for a bunch of shows, and that was one of the ones that was listed. And I think I told you flat out, I'm like, I don't know any idea how I would do a spec script for that show.
Right.
If you're not familiar with a spec script, it's just one of those things where you write an episode basically that would be, within the vein of what they do, and what they do, I think they're doing so well that it'd be really hard to just make that happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it's definitely like an idiosyncratic show. You know what I mean? Like it is very much of its voice. Another show that I think does a really good job with that was The Middle, from around the same time. Like, those characters were who they were, and you were going to pop in, and you're just going to sit down for a fun 30 minutes.
Right.
I think there's another strength though to it, to the format of episodic, and that's the what I call the mini movie, right?
Okay.
Now Batman the Animated Series is a really good example of this, right? Where you have flexible tone in each of the episodes. And this is something that I really appreciate about episodic, so that like you can have like I'll bring up like a Bullet for Bullock, right? That's very much kind of like an old-time Private Eye type of story, and the music reflects that. They have a lot of horns, right? And I like that they can adjust the tone to kind of fit, like, this is what we want to do for this episode. We're kind of going for this.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And then we're gonna get like the Cool Hand Luke, where the music is like got like a ton of like harmonicas in it. You remember that one where he goes undercover and he gets amnesia like while he's undercover, and he can't remember who he is and stuff.
Doesn't he end up in the box or like in a hot house, like the hot house at some point, right? Yeah, exactly.
It's so like, and the styles are different, right? Like the color looks different in those episodes, and it's a different setting, and it's a different feel, and different characters, and the music's all different and everything. And it's like, and again, like there's no real issue with that, because we don't have to have, this has to make sense with the next episode. It's just another adventure that Batman is on. And so it all works under that umbrella.
Now, it's funny you mentioned that one, because it made me immediately jump to something that's totally not related to that, which is the Twilight Zone.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be considered in the same vein as which it would it be as far as considered an episodic?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but it doesn't lean on any. I mean, to me, it works on a whole different type of imagination, where it even doesn't lean on past characters or the same.
Right, it's an anthology series,
as
opposed to the other episodic style ones we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Yeah, the entire like that's episodic like to such a degree, right?
hmm
Anthologies are really in right now, but that's the one where like every episode was different.
Yeah.
Right.
You never knew what was going
different
to happen.
stars in every episode. Yeah, you weren't going to see like no characters come back besides Rod Serling.
Right. You can argue Rod Serling. That's about it.
And I guess Jordan Peele now.
Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally, no. That's a really great example there, Tommy, about the idea that it was. I mean, that was a show. I mean, that was a showcase show. It was one of the things where you got for the time, especially in the originals, where you got so many good actors and creators that were basically. A lot of them are used to doing like playhouse theaters, like the TV stuff that was directly adapted from plays that was put on TV. So you had a wide range of actors that were doing the Twilight Zone, and I don't think that even at the time they really considered, it wasn't for doing what would now be considered, genre TV. Everyone that stepped up to it did an amazing job and did, some really great work on something that's now I think would kind of not. I mean, granted, it's the remake with Jordan Peele is I've heard mixed things about it, but it's one of those things where I think if it was tried to be launched now, I don't know if you get the same caliber of talent that you would back then.
Right.
So,
well, I mean, that's debatable, I think. But.
Sure. No, I agree. I know, but it's one of the things where I think about just so many people were coming from a different place because TV was so new that the idea that we would get that now is, I agree. It's debatable, but it's for another show, basically.
Right. Sure.
Yeah. But I see why you say that because unlike now, then you could only be famous through TV or movies as opposed to what's occurring now, which you don't necessarily have to come through that pipeline in order to be famous. Now I get you. Yeah. A lot of people won't fight themselves in order to get onto such a small venue like they did before. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I mean, but Tommy, I mean, you set it up perfectly because I mean, those are also mini movies, I would say, and you do have different, maybe not different tone because they all kind of have the same flavor. You know what I mean? But the set dressing is different all the time, right? And you get some episodes where you see the budget, right? And then you get other ones that are just like super conversational and are like more like plays and stuff like that. Yeah, I just think that's a really, really great example of probably the best example of what episodic can do really, really well and why it's appealing. Another good one I would say for animation wise is Samurai Jack.
Yeah,
because Samurai Jack like would really go out of their way to make the visuals different. Where like I'm thinking of like their 300 episode. You remember? And they kind of had a different one because they would do something like that 300 episode that episode is entirely in widescreen. And for you guys who don't know, if you ever watched Samurai Jack, like they would play with the aspect ratio of the screen sometimes. So you get widescreen scenes and then you get split screen things and things that would take up the whole screen and everything like that. And it would do this routinely, like within episodes. But that episode they did just like Lawrence of Arabia, right? Just like it was completely widescreen the entire time. And it was a very dramatic episode. And then you have one like Jack's Shoes that's a straight up comedy, or the one where he turns into a chicken.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, it was one of the things where it definitely had, it's a really great example of the idea of what episodic can do and the fact that, there was no overarching story, but it definitely was, it was designed at times if they just wanted to go off and do a one-off, whether it be like the one about, what's the one with the noir and the robot?
Tale of X9.
Yes.
Like my favorite one. Yeah.
Right. It's one of your favorites. I know that. So but that's one of the ones that doesn't really play in the mythology, right? It's just a standalone.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think what's cool about that show is that he has such a strong motive, right? He has such a strong goal. I just got to get back. Right. And every episode is seen as an attempt at that pretty much for the most part. Like you said, there are occasions where he goes off and there's like a little tangent here and there, but for the most part, every episode is kind of like a failed attempt at him reaching his goal.
Sure. So like Gilligan's Island.
Yeah, but I'd say like
exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, I mean, to be fair to Gendy and the people that worked on the show, not to dismiss completely the work of Sherwood Schwartz and the people that did Gilligan's Island. Now that it didn't really occur to me until just now, but I would think if you were a kid that grew up like say 70s, early 80s, and you were watching shows like Knight Rider, I guess would be kind of like one, or what's another good one? Like the Bill Bixby Incredible Hulk, right?
Or the A-Team even.
Magnum PI.
Well, not so much Magnum PI, because Magnum PI didn't really have. I mean, there wasn't an overarching, like, he didn't have to get home, right? It wasn't
Right.
but like with, say, for example, with Hulk, the whole point was he was being pursued. He didn't commit the murder that was alluded to in the opener.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
For something like The Fugitive or the A-Team, something along those lines.
Yes, exactly. Or like if you really obscure, like The Phoenix. Ever watched The Phoenix?
No.
The Phoenix was on, like, it was one of those type shows that was on ABC, where it was the guy who was, I know the actor's name. All I know, his biggest role was he was in Wrath of Khan. He's the blonde-haired guy that worked with like on Khan's crew that gets killed halfway through. Spoilers.
Oh, wow.
Or gets burned up or whatever when they get attacked. But anyway, that was his other show was this thing called The Phoenix, and he was an alien for, it was like Starman or one of those type things where he was from outer space. He's trying to get home. He's trying to find his missing love, but he's on the run from a guy that wants to, catch him or whatever. Same thing with when they adapted Starman the movie to TV. Same thing where it was like they were being pursued. It was a fairly big trope for that time. Was just like, I'm doing heroic stuff like The Fugitive. I'm on the run. And then week to week, it's got an overarching theme, but at the same time, I'm doing stuff week to week that if it really stood alone, it could stand alone by itself.
Right.
Got you. Judson Scott is the name of the character that you're thinking of.
There you go.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, another one's what's another one that's episodic but serialized kind of is like Kolchak the Night Stalker.
Okay. Yeah.
And everyone Kolchak is a schlubby guy that works for this Chicago newspaper. And granted, he's every week he's doing sort of the investigating the paranormal of the week, but at the same time, those episodes generally you could watch them out of order and they generally stand on their own. I don't think they really ever really refer to anything that's gone on before. I don't think.
Right. What
Which
about in
also
comics, though? I mean, is there anything in comics that you can think of, like right now, that's a really good example of episodic? I'm deferring to the three of you because you guys are reading a lot more currently than I am at the moment.
Currently, I mean, it's not like before. That's what I felt when Dark Horse Presents.
Yeah, something like that, or Marvel Comics Presents, or when Action Comics was doing. This is a while ago, obviously, but Action Comics at one point was weekly, and they had Green Lantern, and they had a Superman story, and they had the Secret Six, and they had Black Canary, or a rotating cast of characters. You would get a chunk of a story at a time because they wouldn't, those characters couldn't carry their own book for whatever reason.
Yeah. Really, I think the most you see it is in annuals is the thing that jumps to my head, right? Because I'm thinking of like Tom King's Batman run, right? And there are tangents in there, but I can't really say that any of them is like a one and done, right? Because everything at least goes one issue,
right?
Or goes at least two issues. Well, no, that's not true. The Swamp Thing team up issue, that is one issue, and that's a great one.
That's like a throwback to an old Brave and the Bold, like the Bob Haney, Jim Aparo stuff.
Yeah. So okay, so there's that one, but I'm thinking more of like within that run. I'm thinking that annuals are used for more at least like shorter stories, right? Like you tend to get a bunch of 8-page stories in these,
or in the old days you would get one giant story, a story that had more space to breathe. Yeah.
What comes to mind for me is Archie comic.
That was one of my. That was about to say was kids comics or Archie's another good example.
Yeah.
I think like for example like the Scooby Doo comics or the Scooby Doo team up comics that DC was putting out, if they're still putting them out, were pretty good examples of we're gonna do this issue, we're gonna team up with the JSA, or this issue we're gonna team up with Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy, and then it was pretty much a one and done.
Right.
Those tend to. I mean, we haven't really done an episode on continuity. And I guess we're sort of kind of doing one now on continuity. If you're going to when we start talking about serialized, and the idea that I mean, there was a time when one and dones were all that were how it was done, right?
Yeah.
You might get a 2-parter or a 3-parter, but it wasn't one of those things where in comics it was so much of now like we did our episode talking about the filling of the graphic novel, having to have 6 parts for every story. back then you could buy, if you bought a 100-page giant, you get a couple reprints that were one and dones, and then your main story or 2 or 3 of them were one and dones. Marvel Team Up was another good example. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tommy just sent me a note, and I'm like, you're right. Marvel Team Up would work. Because I realized I'm referring to nothing that was mentioned. But yeah, Marvel Team Up, DC Comics Presents, which was like Superman teaming up with people. Brave the Bold, for the most part, was Batman teaming up with people. Marvel 2-in-1, when the Thing had his own book, when he was teaming up with characters, it was basically a one and done. Or if it carried over, it would be, the Thing would be in the main through line for the story. For example, it would be him in one part with, say, like I don't know.
Disney Plus needs to do a Marvel 2-in-1 story after they get Fantastic Four in the MCU. They gotta do a Thing team up show.
I would kill for that. That would be
right?
amazing.
Where Falcon shows up in one episode, and then we have Hawkeye, and then She-Hulk, and
absolutely,
yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah,
you can have it, Disney.
Yeah, either that or either Marvel Team Up or Marvel 2-in-1, I think would be great. But I don't think they could get what's his name. I don't think they could get Tom Holland for that. I don't know if they could or not. So
they got Spider-Man TV rights,
but. Yeah, I would think those are all great examples of one and dones for the most part. Occasionally you would get, I think there's a couple instances where you have, like, I know there's one run of Marvel Team Up that has like Spider-Man and Shang-Chi one issue, and then Black Widow another episode, and then Nick Fury, and then they all team up again at the end of the story. So you get like a 4-parter, which was rare. It didn't really happen all that much.
Right. When you were saying like the Young comics, that threw Looney Tunes into my head. And I went like, oh yeah, another one, completely episodic, kind of the selling point.
Right.
Right. Tom and Jerry, another one, you know what I mean? like same story over and over again, but we're going to just present it different ways.
Yes. This time they're in the city, this time they're in the country. This time it's Tom, it's Jerry's country cousin. It's, Tom's dealing with Tom's is you ate my baby, that whole thing.
Oh, that's a great one. I love that.
That's a terrific one.
We should do a Tom and Jerry episode. So what do you think then? There's a lot of episodic that's great. What do you think some of the drawbacks are, though?
Well, like we were talking earlier, as much as you get that moment of, there's a change in the moment or there's a growth in the moment, that may not translate into, like, for example, we've talked about how, like, a lot of times we like in animation especially, we like shows where, there's a model for season 1 for these characters, right? And they look a certain way.
You mean like a character model, like a character design? Yeah.
Yes. There's a great, like, Avatar's a great example, right? Like, those kids, by the time those kids get from where they are in season 1 to the end of the show, that their model and the way they look and all that stuff progresses, and you can tell visually that they've had, change in their life, right?
Right.
And that's not something you always get with, say, again, I'll just throw it out there, like with Scooby-Doo. Like, those kids wore those same clothes. Now, granted, you could argue that they were what? Hippies.
Living out the van.
Living out of the van, being all, grungy before grunge was a thing. You could argue that's why. You could also argue that it was cheaper to have one model and not have them evolve or look different from season to season.
Yeah.
But I think it as a visual short, again, getting back to a visual shorthand, I think it's one of those things where I personally think if you don't show that evolution, it doesn't really, it's hard to tell when exactly does the story take place. And sometimes it doesn't matter because, like we've said, episodic doesn't really have the same setup.
Right.
Yeah. But it's like what you said earlier. When you get episodic, it's stuck in time. There's no growth. Or at least there's very little growth for those characters. So you're basically, it's a window in that era that it doesn't escape. That's the issue with it. Like, it's almost a time capsule in itself with those shows and episodes. So it's hard for it to be like, for example, let's say like an old episode had to deal with the phone booth. Can you imagine explaining the phone booth to kids now?
Right.
Where it's or like but that's why I see it as such. Certain aspects of it tend to stay there.
Right.
Yeah.
Creatively, I could see it too being difficult to keep writing the same location, same spot, same characters, same more or less situation, and have it be fresh. right?
Sure.
Like this is why when I said earlier that there's an elegance and a craft and a beauty to doing it really well, is that you can get bored. Also, like you can exhaust an idea, I think. And when you get to a show that has an engine that drives the show, right? That like Phineas and Ferb, right? Phineas and Ferb is a terrifying show to work on for me, right? Like that's sort of my Modern Family to you, Frank. Like the idea that we're doing such a short amount of time, right? And it always has to be set in summer for the most part. There are specials outside of that, but we're set in summer, and it's got to be this cockamamie idea, right? Where we have to do a new song for each episode. Also, like I gotta chill down my spine just thinking about that. You know?
Yeah.
And it's hard. I mean, like writing change is on, I don't want to say easier, but it can be a little bit, right?
Yeah, but
on some level.
Well, to me, I think it depends on how your mind works, because some people thrive in that environment. Hence why Phineas and Ferb could create that aspect of it and create a new song with every episode. But to me, the problem with that is changeover. Like you're used to feeling it a certain way, and then when it changes, it doesn't feel like the same show. A prime example of that is The Simpsons.
Yeah.
In which when they change the showrunner, you can literally feel the different jokes, and it didn't feel as funny. I mean, it felt funny, but in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's sort of like it's like somebody's playing the same song but from before, but the voice is different. They use different chords. It's the same song, lyric for lyric, but it just feels different. You know, the vibe is off. That's what I feel about when the problem with episodic. As soon as it changes hands to a different person, it just feels different. You know.
Yeah. But on the flip side of that, I agree completely. But I also think that the same is true. The inverse is true also, where sometimes you get an episode that sticks out and it feels more special for that reason. So I'll throw in Brave and the Bold, the cartoon Brave and the Bold, not the comics, right? Chill of the Night stands out. And it stands out like in a good way, where you had a show that is very much one thing, and it is an episodic thing, and there are many movies, but that one really like, okay, we went a completely different direction for this one. And I mean, that's widely regarded as one of the best episodes, if not the best among fans.
It's a great episode. It almost feels like it doesn't belong in Brave and the Bold, but I'm glad it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, exactly. I like the idea that it's there too, because if you're making a mandate that we're going to kind of touch all things Batman in this show, right? Then why not do a take like that, right? To kind of be your quasi homage to animated series and stuff like that, before like people were doing that all the time.
Right.
You know? And there's something about the stakes in that one that feel a little bit bigger, you know?
Right. Well, I mean, the other one that's a good example from that show is the one about, it's the one with Adam Strange and Aquaman and the whales.
Adam Strange and Aquaman from the cartoon? Yeah,
from Brave and the Bold. There's an episode, I believe it's Adam Strange is one of the, it's I know it's Aquaman, but it's one of those moments of, Aquaman is played so bold, broadly in that show.
Yeah.
And then you have that moment where he's confronted with the reality of the fact that, people are basically, spoiler for who hasn't seen it, but people are slaughtering whales, right?
Right. Okay.
You remember that episode now?
Yeah, this is starting to sound familiar a little bit. This is the one where like Aquaman's depressed the whole episode, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. That's another one where it's kind of like, he's so lighthearted and he's so like adventurous and he's so like having a good time like pretty much every single other episode he's in, and then you're hit in the face with this moment of wow, this is the reality of of life, and this is what this character that's usually pretty lighthearted has to deal with. It's definitely a moment that you don't expect in a show like that.
Right. The other episode I'll bring up, I know Tommy's going to groan on this, and I don't want to get too much into it, but City on the Edge of Forever, classic Star Trek episode. That's another one that episodic, right? Every episode is kind of its own thing, but something about that one feels definitive, feels more serious, more is on the line. right?
Right.
I don't know
Oh,
how
yeah.
it's done. But I think it's interesting that's able to happen,
Right.
you know?
Sure.
Yeah, Frank, you were talking about Aquaman's Outrageous Adventure.
Is
it?
that the one?
I think that's
That Aquaman's Outrageous Adventure is the one where they're in the motorhome, right?
Oh, no,
Oh,
not
okay,
that one.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but Zach, you're right. I don't like that episode.
No, I know.
Not at all.
But I'm just kind of in awe that they're able to pull that out. And maybe it's just a manner of it's just a really solid episode. Like sometimes maybe just the really good episodes are the ones that feel that way because maybe they suck you in. I don't know. That could be it.
Right.
Right. That could be a completely subjective thing. I'm not sure. I'm just kind of thinking about it off the top of my head.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's. I think it's one of those things where again, it's just, it was if it was the moment or the episode wasn't written as well, I don't think it would have it would have landed or worked. I guess.
Yeah.
But I think, like I said, in the Brave and the Bold thing, I didn't consider that. But yeah, that's one of those moments where you're just like, you're thrown for a loop because again, that show generally is not real, heavy.
Right.
Mystery in Space is the name of the episode.
Thank you.
Thank
yes. Is that season 1?
Yeah, it is season 1.
Okay.
Episode 14.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But yeah, that's a good one. But yeah, it's just one of those moments that, again, especially the way they put that version of Aquaman, I mean, he's basically Hercules from Marvel, but basically that version of Aquaman doesn't really, everything's great. Everything's awesome because I'm adventuring, or I'm adventuring with my friends. So everything is terrific. But
no, he very much, he knows what he is and he's proud of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's what I wanted Jason Momoa to be, but we got something else.
Yeah, we did.
So
not bad. We didn't get a bad thing. It's just, but we got something different.
We got something else. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So then what about serialize? Let's jump into that. So this, I will confess that I thought all of you guys were going to be like, no, I like serialize better. So, this is a pleasant experience for me that wow, like we all kind of have like a love for episodic as well. So I'll just open it up to you guys. So what works well about serialized?
Unfortunately, arguably the best shows on TV are serialized, like award winning. Yeah. As far as how people rate them, see, unfortunately, I believe in serialized, they're hard to rewatch.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, but I love them just because
that's interesting.
It's an elongated piece of storytelling that makes you feel like it's a novel, or it just deepens characters. You see people go through arcs that you couldn't see in episodic, and you like to see the change. It brings it. I think it brings it real.
There's definitely the journey aspect of it for sure. The idea that you're seeing a character in one spot at the beginning, and by the end, all the stuff that they've been through, all the stuff that they've endured, either takes a toll or changes them as a character or changes them as a person. And I think, that's one of the things you don't really get in serialized stuff. It's kind of hard to measure that in a serialized show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You said something really interesting, Tommy, that I'm kind of going to hold on to for when we start talking about what serialized doesn't do very well. But yeah, I mean, you really opened my head up to something, to realization I didn't have. But so I'll save it. I'll just go into that later. But yeah, I think there's something super fulfilling about seeing a character start in one place and end in a completely different spot at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Breaking Bad is a great example of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
in my opinion. But I think really like the real power of it, anytime people's obsessive relationships with a show or with something now is because of serialization.
Oh yeah,
completely. Sure. I mean that is completely the reason for it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And there would be a time I would have thought that in a weird way, films almost did it better for a long time, right? Even though I'm not even talking sequels, but I would just like films tracked growth better for a while. And it weirdly took TV a long time, I think, to realize like, oh wait, like we can kind of tell longer stories if we just started stringing these episodes together in a weird way. Cause like soaps have been doing it forever.
Yeah.
Right.
And nobody had jumped on to it yet.
Yeah. Well, to me, a great example of that, I think, was Cheers that jumped onto that. I mean, there's earlier examples. I'll even say from me binging I Love Lucy, you see them do small serialized stuff when she's pregnant.
Yeah.
But it's nothing that really changes the dynamics of the show other than they bring on Little Ricky, you know. but with Cheers, it was always will they or won't they with Sam and Diane.
Right.
In which they broke up, got back together again, and the characters will talk about what the other one did past, but not overly emphasize it enough. But one episode, the one that really shines for me that I remember is Soap with Billy Crystal. But to me, I just thought it was a parody of soap operas. I didn't think it was anything that would be serialized, you know?
Right.
I mean,
I think the thing with soaps is that why they worked and others didn't try them, I suspect, is because they were daily. Because there was less story to keep track of when you're watching it one day, then the next day, then the next day, as opposed to, you know, week after week with hiatuses here and there. So you'd get the occasional primetime show that would try to dabble in that storytelling every once in a while, like Soap, like you say, which was very much a send-up of soap operas. But then you had like Dark Shadows attempt it at one point, the vampire soap opera. But I feel like those episodes, like half of the episode would be a recap as to what happened before, and then the rest would be like new material, and then the next episode would be that material again, and then some new material, just trying to accommodate for that lag in viewing, not being day to day. So I've always suspected that was why they shied away from it for a while.
It was almost as if executives at all times thought they only had you for one episode.
It felt
like you, if you were a fan of I Love Lucy, you may not be big enough a fan to watch next week. So we don't want to do anything that you know talks to the previous episode, which is insanity, really.
Right. Well, I think they also wanted people to be able to come in. I think they wanted a new viewer to be able to jump in and feel right on board and up to speed with everyone else. And I feel like that was an advertising directive.
Yeah.
I think also at the time you didn't, you know, it's you know, unlike today where, you know, it's one of those things like I think someone brought up earlier the idea of, you know, I can just drop in and watch a show and then go on about my life and not really worry about, you know, what happens next per se, or what these characters do next per se. That's, you know, the next episode's going to be Lucy's going to want to be at the club because, you know, Tyrone Powell or whoever is playing at the club with Ricky, you know, and then, you know, or whoever it is, Bob Hope, whatever the guest star was that week, you know, you could drop in, drop out and not really. And the other thing is there wasn't, you know, think back to when you could start recording shows, and I don't mean DVR, I mean like VHS, you know, that kind of thing, how difficult it was to make sure that you got the show that you wanted to watch, you know, and record it and be able to catch up with it if you weren't there to watch it as it happened. I remember there were shows that I wanted to watch as a kid that I remember that I was excited about. And because we didn't have, you know, the technology wasn't there, you know, getting into fights with my parents about wanting to watch something because we were going to go out or visit someone and I didn't want to go, you know?
Yeah.
You missed a show. Yeah.
Yeah. If you missed a show, you missed it. Maybe you catch it in syndication. If it wasn't syndicated.
If you were lucky.
Right. Or if you were lucky at the end of the season and they ran, you know, they had, you know, episodes of failure. They were
reruns.
Yeah, exactly. That was one way to catch it.
And God help you for spoilers, because as soon as that show came out, people are talking about it. You couldn't walk anywhere without, especially it's a big show, big name show, and you missed it. You best believe before the first hour of work appears, people are already talking about it.
Or the schoolyard. You get to school and everybody like, did everyone see such and such last night? No. Well, here's what happened.
Yes.
You know?
Unfortunately, one episode of the Cosby Show, the one where Rudy had a sleepover, and there was the patty cake episode. I missed half of it. And best believe I knew that song before lunchtime.
Right.
Yes.
That's funny. But yeah, I mean, this is what drives like appointment viewing before Netflix and streaming was a thing. You know, and I remember there was an interview I had heard with Greg Rucka, and he kind of like encapsulated this entire topic like perfectly. And he said, you read one book, you're reading for plot, right? You read a book series, you're reading for character. Right. And I think that's the big distinction, is that like episodic tends to be like plot driven, like what's the setup, what's the scenario, and that kind of is the most important thing. And serialize is definitely more about like when I think of serialized shows, when I think of like Breaking Bad, I think of like character moments more than I can episodes.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see the larger part of that. Yeah. I mean, I could think of also of like, to me, like watching Three's Company. I'd watch it just to see what kind of stupid thing Jack would do in order to get out of a situation. It felt very like I Love Lucy. Like,
yeah, of course.
It was more so what stupid thing she's gonna do in order to get out of this situation she created for herself. You know?
Right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. To me, in a little bit, to me, I'd argue the fact for the episodic that it was character driven in some ways, because the goofiness of it is what I like to be reminded of time and time again. I can almost barely remember the plot of how it stretched out. What stands out to me is the action of maybe one or two characters.
Right.
Yeah. So another example is Urkel.
Right. Another example. Yeah.
Although he did grow. Finish your thought, but
they couldn't stop him. He had to grow. But it was just the uniqueness of the character, and whatever problem that was there, you almost watched it just to see how he would get out of it, or how he would think his way out of the situation, you know?
Yeah.
I think a lot of times a show or a comic can start in one vein and then realize, oh, there's more story here. You know, I think it's one of the things where when I was thinking about this episode in general, I thought about, like, say, for example, Venture Brothers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Venture Brothers starts out as a straight up parody of Johnny Quest. It's supposed to be, somewhat episodic, and then you start to realize, oh, there's a bigger universe here. We can expand this out. We can do more with this, and then it starts to gain momentum and gains a mythology of its own. I know, I know from listening to their commentaries that the Jackson Public and Doc Hammer have said that, more often than not, just because a character's in the background doesn't mean, that they don't have a story for that character. Like, there's plenty of, I've watched, I've listened to plenty of other commentaries while watching the shows, and they've said, they'll stop or they'll focus on one character in the background. We're like, I would love to do a series on that guy alone. They've said that plenty of times. Another good example of that is the comic book Cerebus. Cerebus at one point was supposed to just be a Conan parody.
Yeah, you're right. Forgot about Cerebus.
It was supposed to just be a goofy send up of the Conan stuff, the Robert E. Howard, Marvel Conan book. And then it eventually takes on a life of its own and goes completely away from the fact that, Cerebus starts out as a barbarian, an aardvark barbarian, to what it evolves into is completely different. So I think a lot of times a lot of these, either shows or comics can start in one spot as being, a send up or a parody. And then all of a sudden the creator realizes, no, there's more to it, and it becomes more episodic over time.
Yeah. Venture Brothers is a really great observation, I think, because to me, that show was episodic, but in a season perspective, as weird as that sounds, right? The season itself had like an arcing story, right?
Sure.
And tracked growth. But almost at the end of every season, they would do something to kind of like reset everything back to where it was. Right?
Well, I would say yes and no.
Hang on. So what I'm saying, but I think after a while though, they seem to really commit to tracking change and like, okay, no, we're not gonna, like, we're gonna let Hank evolve instead of having evolve and then have some reason for him to resort back to status quo, I'll say. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, like I'm thinking like the end of season 1 into season 2, right? Something very big happens at the end of season 1.
Absolutely.
Right. But the open of season 2, which is a great open, I love it, but something happens to get us back to the show that we know.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But that's an interesting case for you because some stuff is just so off the topic. Like, what was the one with is it Return of the Mummy or whatever, where they go to the Egyptian? That episode alone, like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Right.
It connects to nothing.
Explain that further, so in case people don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah. Frank, you do it better than me as far as I'm all over the place with that.
It's basically, I mean, it's an episode that I know, and they even mention again in the commentary stuff. It's a pretty divisive episode because some people like love it and hate it at the same. People love it or hate it because the fact that it doesn't. It's an episode that's self-contained. It's a one and done, and it has all this stuff that is basically kind of self-referential to the episode. It has nothing to do with anything else, but. I love the episode. I think it's a fantastic episode, but it's also one of those.
Clarify. We're talking about Venture Brothers Season 2, Episode 4, Escape to the House of Mummies Part 2.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, people are like, was it Part 1? Did we miss something?
There's no Part 1 to this episode.
It's
just the Part 2.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I, it's one of those things where, I think we've talked about another podcast. We talked about the Zeppo. It's another example of an episode that just doesn't really.
Yeah, I love the Zeppo Buffy.
Yeah, Zeppo's a great episode. Doesn't really have anything to do with anything else in Buffy, but it's just the episode to itself. And people again, love it or hate it. But this one definitely was one of the ones where I'm like, nope. I love the show. I love the fact that this episode exists, and it doesn't really have to be entwined with everything else. Another example, and Tommy, you can back me up on this, is that Rick and Morty has been kind of meta recently about the idea of like, we're getting back to what we did where it was episodic and we're not telling a bigger story.
Yes.
And they get without spoiling anything, they get very referential about the fact that we used to do different stuff at the beginning and we're trying to get back to that. Themselves as characters mention it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, in the current season, we got a fair amount of that kind of like nudge, nudge, wink, wink to the audience of like, oh yeah, we know we used to do, one and done stories, and some of you love that stuff and some of you want the bigger mythology. And I think that's another show that does, that may have started out as a oneer or wanted to do, because you think back to the first season, there's a lot of just one and done stories.
Yeah, not interconnected at all. It's just they'll drop them into something, or we'll see them in the midst of something, and then it work its way out, or it'll have no correlation to what happened before. Just knowing that it's something self-contained in which what they do, it's going to be weird.
Right.
Watch, is that as opposed to.
Rick's gonna be super scientific dick, and that Morty's gonna freak out about everything. But other than that, you don't really know the fact that there's much more to those stories, right?
Yeah, you don't at all.
No.
Which I kind of prefer for that because it seems like there's the expectation of where they should go with certain things or what happened to somebody prior to that. Then they have to keep a tally or a timeline based upon what they did,
Well, getting back to Venture Brothers, when you I think Zach and I talked about it when they were planning stuff out, and they would have the whiteboard of where, right, Zach? We talked about the whiteboard in Venture Brothers where they were trying to map out where characters were supposed to be at the beginning and where they get to in the end.
Mm-hmm.
For Venture, I mean, that was one of the things where like that was, they would talk about that stuff. Another example I thought was interesting was, if we're talking about Harmon stuff, Dan Harmon stuff, is if you look at like all of season 3 for Community tells one story from the beginning of the first episode to the end. That whole season is an experiment in serialized sitcom.
Yes.
Wouldn't you say, Tommy? Right?
Yeah.
Where you have the whole story about Troy trying to, whether he's going to choose what path he's going to choose, and the stuff with John Goodman's character.
Yeah, trying to woo him over to plumbing. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All that stuff is and even there were interviews at the time where Harmon was like, yep, I'm trying to see, because you do something along the lines of like The Wire, where you start at one place and then you try to get it, you know what your ending is, and you write all these episodes in between, and it's the whole season basically, of trying to do that, but in a sitcom, which is not really something that sitcoms do.
No, not really. And I mean, that's the joke that I say about when I'm talking serialized and episodic to people, is I'm like, even the sitcoms are serialized now. Which, when I was growing up, that wasn't a thing. Rewatching things now, like when I'm rewatching like repeats of Fresh Prince or something, like I do see little nuggets of things that carry over, but it's not super important that you need to know. Like you can go into that episode
Right.
completely fresh, and you hit the ground running and you're fine, right? You don't
Right.
need any explanation for anything like that. But it's like the one thing that I think that was really big into this was Friends.
Mhm.
I think Friends really pushed this a little
Sure.
bit as far as they could in the day, because
Right.
I think of it like Star Trek: The Next Generation, where you have kind of like these hyphenated shows that were episodic, but really flex some serialization at times.
Mhm.
And Star Trek would end every season on a cliffhanger. And for
Yeah.
a while, at least when I was seriously watching Friends, it seemed like Friends was doing that.
Yeah, they definitely
You know?
they definitely want to think about it all summer.
Yeah.
Whatever, what when it was like, what's a good example, like when Ross is marrying Emily, is that one a good one?
Yeah. And when he says Rachel's name,
Yes.
right before, they end on that.
Yeah.
And then it's like your whole summer's like, ooh, it's going to happen. Are they going to get back together?
Right.
There was the season before that when he's dating, he and Rachel had broken up, and he's dating Phoebe's friend, and they're at the beach, and he's in the hallway, and it's like, which door did he go into? You remember that one?
I do remember that now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, like when you mentioned that, when you talk about old school sitcoms, like for example, you had a little bit of that kind of like callback to other stuff, but it was more along the lines of like, this is a Darlings episode in Andy Griffith, or this is an Ernest T. Bass episode in Andy Griffith. But it wasn't a situation where I don't think they, I think they had an episode to fill that week, and they did the episode. And if they had a character like an Ernest T. Bass, or I think I'm trying to think I can't remember what was the character that was played by Jerry Van Dyke. Do you remember, Tommy?
For
Andy Griffith. Yeah.
Yeah, you would ask me.
But you know what I mean, right? Like that character was recurring too, right?
Yes, he was. But he wasn't emphasized every episode.
No, he wasn't. He didn't live in Mayberry. He just showed
No.
up. He was, if I remember correctly, he was just a guy that came in that like was visit the town or whatever. But it was one of those things where I don't, I think like you said, Zach, it's a much more recent thing where sitcoms are much more cognizant of, of doing a serialized story.
But you remember the actor or the character?
I think it was Jerry Van Dyke. I think was the actor that was the one that was on, unless I'm thinking Jerry Van Dyke was on Dick Van Dyke show as opposed to
No, he was definitely on Dick Van Dyke show, but I'm trying to remember who he was on the Andy Griffith show.
He appears to have played Jerry on the Andy Griffith show.
He was?
His name is Jerry in the credit I'm looking at.
Convenient.
In
Yes.
Banjo Playing Deputy, he played a character named Jerry.
Okay. That might be what I'm thinking of. But another more recent example of serialized sitcom, I mean, you can argue it's a dramedy more than it is a sitcom sometimes, is when Atlanta did their last season of Robin season,
Mm-hmm.
where they were trying to tell a story with a theme for the entire season of Atlanta, and that one has a start of the has a beginning, middle, and end for the season that has a pretty big payoff in the last one. Wouldn't you say, Tommy?
No, it definitely does. It pays off something that occurred in the very first episode, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. But I get what you're saying. What? In some cases, for those shows, we definitely see them going through a transition, but it's not every episode. Like for a lot of stuff we see today on TV, certain standalone episodes, like the one when what's his name went to go pick up the piano.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it made no sense for the episode to be there, but it was Atlanta for what it was, and for the stuff that occurred for that particular show.
Yeah, so the one where Darius goes to pick up the piano from. You remember the character's name?
No, the only thing that sticks out in my mind is like a parody of Michael Jackson.
Yeah, that's exactly what he's supposed to be.
Yeah, yeah, but jeez, it just came off as a creepy individual from beginning to end.
Yes, but yeah, Atlanta, like I said, that was the one that most recent in my mind was doing the serialized that I can think of recently, is doing the serialized storytelling for a sitcom. The most recent one I can think of. There may be others.
Teddy Perkins.
Teddy Perkins, that's right.
Yes.
He's going to pick up Teddy Perkins' piano. Yeah, it's a standalone episode, but definitely it's within that season of Robin season where it's just kind of like, what in the world is this episode about?
Yes. Ugh.
Yeah, it's a great episode though.
Great.
Man, is it good.
How I Met Your Mother was another one.
Sure.
Fairly recent.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Yeah.
But I feel that show was weird because I think he knew how to end the series, and everything else was filler.
Yeah. I mean that show created a bit of had kind of an interesting problem where it was like I remember hearing something with the creators saying that like when they actually got like Ted and Robin together, they actually liked their chemistry very much, right? But they had already set up from the voiceover bit where like he's telling the story to his kids and stuff that he calls her to the kids Aunt Robin. And so it's like, well, okay, like there's no getting out of this corner as much as we like them together. Once we got the actors together and we actually saw they had some chemistry in these scenarios and everything, we can't do that. And so I think spinning into sort of the drawbacks of serialized is you better have a plan.
Well, yeah.
That's one. You better have a plan.
Well, sure. Yeah, most definitely.
Right? Because it sticks out when you don't. And another big one for me was Lost. I was not huge into Lost. I was a fan in season 1, like everybody else. And then basically I had like a night class that started a couple of weeks like later into the semester, and it was running. It was the same night as Lost, and so I just never kept up with it because I had a class. But I remember I was working with people that were like fanatically into the show. And this is seasons down the road, and I'm hearing them all. It was like every week they would all get together, like, so what do you think this means? What do you think this means? And just hearing their conversation, and knowing a little bit about story, like what I know, I'm like, they don't really have a plan. Just hearing from what you're talking about, I'm like, this show seems aimless to me.
Yeah, they were. They would tell you differently, but no, they were pretty. They didn't know. They had no clue.
What was funny was people who wrote for the show would come off the show like they don't have a clue. And they would tell in articles they don't know what's going on.
Yeah. And so I think How I Met Your Mother had a scent of that to it, where the thing that I would always say, and granted, I never saw the end, so I still don't know how it ends. So I'm just saying, so don't spoil it for me.
Not well.
Take your time. See that when you have nothing completely to do.
But the thing that I would say to people, because I would still be a fan very, very late into the show, was I was like, serialize the show didn't quite make much sense after a while.
Right.
But on an episodic level, that show was still very good, always, I thought.
Oh, there's some great episodes of that show for sure. It's just one of those things where, they didn't know. I don't know if they just didn't know where they were going to land, or they figured, it's kind of like we solved the mystery in the first season. What do we do now?
Yeah.
It's kind of what I feel that show was like they got the, their mystery was this, and they got to it, and I'm like, oh, so what do we do for the next, 8 seasons we're on?
Well, it's funny to me. I think that show shined better when it was episodic, like Robin Sparkles.
Oh,
yeah. It was brilliant then. But whenever they went to the overall How I Met Your Mother, when it got back online with the overall story of the show, it felt forced.
It's kind of like X-Files.
Yeah, that's another great example. Yeah, X-Files. Yeah,
because again, if you think of X-Files and the fact that the pedigree that it has, that it was, that's where, if we didn't have X-Files, we wouldn't have got Breaking Bad, because Vince Gilligan cuts his teeth on X-Files, and even there's some elements and camera work that's done in X-Files that translates over into Breaking Bad. If you like the episodes where, or the episode when they introduced the twins, I believe is the one where the people that have the shrine.
Yeah.
And all the people in the town, it's like an X-Files opening. Like you're like, what in the world's going on here?
I think we wouldn't have many things if it wasn't for X-Files. I really don't. Like, X-Files to me is the very, very first like modern TV show for the internet era, right? Where it would do things in the open, right? Where it would say like the truth is out there, but for some episodes it wouldn't say that. It would say something else. But it was also before DVR. Right, where like you had to just catch it that week. Be like, whoa, what was that?
Right. Right. But I think it's one of those things where it's interesting that I think a lot of people, I specifically, like, while I enjoy some of the mythology of X-Files, I think a lot of it is hampered by the fact that if they just stuck to doing one and dones and made mini movies that were 45 minutes long, it would have been better than what how it turned out.
Right.
Because I think that really was their strength. I think doing those 45, doing an episode that's self-contained and a one and done, I think they just really excelled at that. They did some amazing one and done episodes, that didn't have to deal with Mulder's sister and what the gray aliens really want, and the smoking man, even though, I like the smoking man, but at the same time, he's just going to smoke and look menacing. What else is he going to do?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, okay. I get your point, but at the same time, I feel like the real selling point was the mythology for that show. I mean, that's the thing that I can remember in the time everybody talking about was more so that.
Sure.
Than really like the bizarre villain they fought that week.
Right.
I think one of the other issues that Serialized has, and this is something comics have been dealing with for a very, very long time, is accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're more than likely going to find somebody who, Lord knows I'm guilty of this 100 times. Like, I've heard good things. I want to get into it, but it's like, you're 3 seasons in, 4 seasons in, haven't watched a minute. Well, I'm not going to start now.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
What if somebody tells you it gets really good in the middle of season 4?
Yeah.
I'm intrigued. I'll get to it. I'll get to it,
Well, one thing I say about serialized, it's ticking. Like, no matter how good that story is or how developed you make those plots, everybody's waiting for it to end. Everybody's watching for it to end. As opposed to episodic. Like, let's say, throw it out there, The Simpsons. There's no general end in mind for that series, so they don't have to conceive an end until they want to. But for serialized, you're waiting for it to end.
I think I know what the end of Simpsons is.
Okay, when they meet Mickey Mouse, when's it?
No, I think the last episode of Simpsons, whenever it happens, is going to be that moment where they move forward in time.
We've gotten that.
It's going to. Right, but we've gotten Bart graduate, but he's always in 4th grade again. It's going to be the time, like, he's really going to go to 5th grade. Lisa's going to move, it's going to be the episode where, like, everybody evolves and it has it take. That's what I think. That's my theory.
It could be, but at least when you watched Lost, you foresaw them moving to get off the island. Game of Thrones. When is Khaleesi gonna come to Westeros? It's always an end game. Like, you can't push it to a certain extent or you lose viewership. The longer you withhold that information or that end game, you risk losing people thinking that it's taking a turn for bad. That's what I felt in the 3rd season of Lost. When it hit at certain points, they don't know what they're doing, or I don't see any end in sight. I'm not going to be on the hook, Same with Battlestar Galactica. What happens when it comes to this point? What are they going to do, That's the thing with serialized for me. It all comes to a head as to how is it going to end. In fact, that's what spoiled me with Sopranos as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they cheated us with the ending on Sopranos, and now we'll never get it.
Well, and I think also the thing is that endings, there is, I mean, every finale has kind of a special quality to them, even for episodic, like sitcoms and stuff like that. The finale is sort of a big deal always, but I feel like for serialized, the ending really puts pressure on the creators to, like, really nail something and do something special, do something poignant, do something, surprising, unsuspected that you didn't see coming for 3 seasons prior, and I think, and the thing, like, endings are tough to do. Endings are very hard to make fulfilling. I think.
No, you're 100% correct. But some people nail it. Like, I say The Good Place did an excellent job on ending their run. Breaking Bad does an excellent job of making a run to the point that you want to see what happened prior to all of that. Who else has excellent endings to their series?
Wonder Years.
He said Wonder Years. For me, it's Newhart, and that was an episodic show that ended brilliantly.
Yeah, pretty much a gold standard.
Yeah, yeah.
Or St. Elsewhere.
I never saw the ending.
It's a pretty good one too.
That's pretty good one too. It's a interesting one for sure.
It's a similar ending.
I think a great ending is The Shield. That's a great ending.
That does really well too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But Tommy, you were saying something. So the thing that you said that jogged my memory is you were saying that serialize is kind of hard to revisit. And yeah, you're right. Like, I didn't think about it going in, but I'm like, yeah, you know what though? I tend to not rewatch serialized stuff as much because it's a commitment.
Yeah, it is a huge commitment.
Bigger commitment. And it's
Yes.
the thing. And it did make me think about like books. Like, I tend to not read novels a second time, third time around. The books I pick up are the books that you can kind of like go into any page and just sort of like read it like a magazine. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I will confess my unyielding love for Paul Reiser's book Couplehood, and that book very much runs like that. Like, you could open any page and just kind of like, okay, I'm going to go from here, and that's the literary equivalent of an episodic television show where I'm just going to watch whatever episode. That's how I watch The Office. I mean, I know Office has a serialized component to it, and I was told by many people, if you're going to watch The Office, like, watch it in order, like our engineer among some of those people. And I was like, nah, like, I'll figure it out. Like, you know, like I enjoyed it, I think, more that I didn't have to start like, okay, here's season 1, episode 1, and then the second one, and didn't have to watch it that way. Like, I would just watch it and I'd be like, okay, like I could just keep it straight in my head. Like, all right, like, you know, Ed Helms isn't in this one yet. And, you know, Jim and Pam aren't together in this one yet. Okay, I get it. Like, I could piece it together. And, you know, but I do think a lot of other shows don't have that problem with accessibility. We should try and talk about comics really quick about that if we can. You know? I mean, that's a big thing that I know that the companies are wrestling with at all times. Like, how do we get more people to come in and not be afraid by the number that's on this cover that's making me feel like I have to read the first 147 of these before I read 148 that's on the stands now.
Yeah, but I think we've talked about it before, and I honestly feel like that's, you know, it's a cop out. It's one of those things where honestly, it's I understand that what you're saying, and I understand when people, you know, when they're like, oh, we have to put on a million number ones. You know, no, you don't. I mean, this medium that got you, it's a thing of what got you here to this point was not having everything be so simply and laid out. And yeah, you're telling a lot simpler stories or more one and done or two and done stories back then. And it was a little easier, more accessible, and all you had was an editor's note, you know, to give you an idea of what had happened before, or someone explain, you know, in a conversation, you know, Spider-Man says, well, I met this guy before, I fought Sandman, or I fought Electro, or I fought, you know, whoever before, and then let's go take him, you know, put him back in jail. You know, it wasn't, you know, I don't think it has to be quite so spoon-fed to people, especially now when you have a smartphone in your hand. If you really want to know what happened in issue 57, there's a million fan sites. There's Marvel's own site, you know, that will explain to you exactly down to, you know, who's in it, who drew it, who wrote it, who inked it, who colored it, all that stuff, which, you know, growing up, not to sound like an old guy yelling at clouds, but I didn't have that. You know, I was lucky enough if someone in the neighborhood knew about it, or there was a good editor's note, or, you know, my cousins had an issue or whatever. But I think now it's one of those things where, you know, it should be as simple as go to marvel.com.
Yeah.
And look it up.
No, that's like Clifton, like what you were saying about like the old time executives wanted to encourage people to just kind of tune into a show at any given week and not have them be lost, right? Comics has kind of been the exact opposite, where we're just going to, you know, pile story on top of story on top of story on top of story. And now we're afraid that we've alienated people from jumping on like that. And my thing has always been, if somebody's a fan, they're going to put in the time. If somebody discovers something late and they like it, they'll figure it out. You know, they'll go back.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So all right. So we should start getting close to wrapping up here. So what do you guys think did it better, though? Who does serialize? Who does episodic better, comics or TV?
I think episodic in comics is far better than in TV, because I think there's the built-in element of, you know, the doors don't stay open. We don't keep telling you, you know, amazing Spider-Man stories if we don't sell you this book next month. So, you know, I think the other thing is the fact that not every episodic show has the cliffhangers aren't quite as dire or quite as enticing to come back the next month as they are in comics.
Right.
I think a really well done cliffhanger in a comic book makes you want to get that next issue and find out what happened.
Okay. That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, you're true. You're right.
I halfway disagree with Frank. I was pausing because I was trying to present as to why I halfway disagree with.
Okay.
I like the imagination of episodic in TV. When the cliffhangers in TV are a bit forced, I prefer the episodic stuff. That's what I'm discovering over time. Like, it took me a long time to come to that. I don't like episodic in comics. I mean, they're good stories nonetheless, but that's why I get trades. I don't think they're given enough pages to tell a good story in comics. I like it's rare occasions where I like episodic in comics. Like, for example, like how did Ab and Sur lose the ring, so to speak?
Mm-hmm.
I like little bursts, but I like grander stories in comics than I do in TV.
The Green Lantern ring, you mean?
Yeah. I'm sorry, the Green Lantern ring. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Tommy, I'm with you. I think the other thing about episodic in comics, like we said, I mean, there's just less of it. You don't see that. I appreciate it when we get it, for sure. I think there's a lost art to doing a good story in 22 pages, like you were saying. Almost nobody tries.
Yeah.
Or almost nobody's allowed to try. I don't know. I don't quite know what the answer to that is. Serialized, though, I got to go with TV. I think TV does it better just because outside of a couple of instances, it's generally one person's vision, the showrunner, and it's not like, again, there's exceptions, but it's not like that somebody's going to pick up the characters after that show is ended. So I think for that reason, I say that TV works better. Whereas, somebody's going to write Daredevil after Mark Waid leaves and or whoever's on it now, I forget. But yeah, so that's my answer for that. So, all right. So that's episodic versus serialized. It depends. Haven't said that in a while. There we go. Before we go, if you check out our website at letmeknowhowitis.com, you can find all of our past episodes as well as notes, links, and examples to some of the things that come up in conversation. You can also find a link to our YouTube channel where you can check out episodes there as well. Also, you can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/letmeknowhowitis and follow us on Twitter at our show's initials, LMKHII. And if you'd like to suggest a topic for us to discuss, you can post it in our comment section. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next week.